am a first-year school psychology doctoral student at University of Kentucky, and my research interests are autism. I am currently working with Dr. Alicia Fidowa. I don't know if anyone has heard her name before. She does a lot with physical activity. So I am doing a study on physical activity and ASD, and I'm interested in how participating in group physical activity increases interpersonal self-efficacy in those who have autism. So how they communicate with others and how confident they are in their communication with others. What we know right now is adolescents aren't meeting the minimum criteria for physical activity daily, and those with ASD are even less. So it's definitely an area of concern when it comes to health, especially because of all the comorbidity health issues that occur with ASD. So it is important to get physical activity, and I think it is also important for their social communication skills because there's already some deficits in certain individuals with ASD, not all, but interacting with their peers is important. So I am doing a study, and it's my first research study ever since I'm a first year, so I'm really excited. There are some things, and listening to all of you, I don't know if anyone is going to be able to participate, but everyone in here probably knows someone who may be able to participate. So I'm still going to give everyone flyers and kind of talk to you guys about it. In order to participate, the adolescent must be 13 to 18 years old. So I know that gets rid of a lot of it. Yeah, so there's not a lot of research on the adolescent population, so that's kind of why I targeted it. They must have a diagnosis of ASD, as I said. And, okay, so there's a survey that they have to fill out on their interpersonal communication. And I put it into Microsoft Word, and it's at a readability level of an 8th grade reader. Someone who can read at 8th grade level.
Can they receive help in filling it out, or do they have to do it?
Yeah, I'm minimal help. I mean, I'll be there. I'll be reading. I don't want, I would be there, probably reading it out loud to them and kind of going through, you can say this for this, like go through the answer choices with them, but obviously I wouldn't want any parental influence on their answers, which you guys probably assumed. So if you guys know anyone who would be able to do that, who is able to read, I compared it in my IRB as kind of if they're able to do their homework on their own with minimum help, then they should be able to, it's a very basic survey. And then at least one parent or guardian, so whoever takes care of the child on a daily basis, whoever has legal, I don't want to say ownership of the child, but authority of the child, to fill out the parental aspect of it, because I'm also looking at parental barriers as to why the kids who don't participate in physical activity aren't able to get to physical activity. So kind of things along the line of finances, transportation, things of that nature. So it's for kids who do participate and do not participate in physical activity. So it doesn't just have to be adolescents who do participate. So that's kind of my little spiel. So.
Can it be from anywhere in the state?
Yeah, it can be anyone. But we would have to meet up and do the survey. So that would be, I'm willing to drive anywhere in order to get it. So, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this too, and this goes for anybody who had the sign-in sheet. We have a really large listserv.
Okay.
And so the last time I looked, it had 822 members on it.
Okay, awesome.
Because our population can't, for obvious reasons, always make a meeting. But we have a pretty active group on our listserv.
Okay,
so
awesome.
we can get that out to a lot of people, and that will help a lot to target those people who are near enough or can meet with you and or fit that small age range.
Yeah, definitely. And I can send it. Do you want me to email it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And I do, I know a lot of you might be involved. I coach top soccer and I do Special Olympics, but I didn't feel comfortable distributing this flyer to my athletes in Special Olympics because I didn't feel as if like I wanted them, they have to participate. Now this is my coach. So if anyone else, coaches or does anything with those organizations, of course you can distribute to them as well. So,
Okay.
really anyone.
Yeah, if you'll send that, then we'll get it onto the listserv.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
no problem.
And you guys can just.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
And everyone remember, the same goes for all of you. You are free to join the listserv. It's strictly autism related. You won't receive anything that isn't autism related as a rule. And it's a 24/7 opportunity to send comments or questions to other experts. And for sure, it is filled with the experts. So just know that if you sign up for that, you'll get added to the listserv, and there's nothing more you need to do than that. So, okay, I guess we have, Greg, could you introduce yourself?
Oh,
Yes.
I know we're supposed to introduce it.
We've already done ours.
Okay.
Someone here to speak with us tonight to talk about what's going on the legislative front, right? So you're welcome to come and then tell us more about yourself. This is Sarah.
Sarah Kidder.
Sarah Kidder. Thanks for being
Would y'all
here.
mind if I sat? I don't
Not at all. Not at all. So there's a chair there. If you want to bring it out front, that's
Yeah, as
fine.
long as if y'all can see
Yeah.
me and all day running around in fields.
Sure. Oh, that'll be absolutely fine. Whatever you're most comfortable
this is
doing.
good.
Thank you for being here.
Of course. So I'm Sarah Kidder. I actually have an aunt who has autism. Oh my
gosh, how old?
She's almost 70.
Whoa.
Yeah, she didn't get her diagnosis until obviously a lot later. So it was about 5 years ago.
Wow.
She has Asperger's, and so had never really had much support besides her family growing up, and then and now she also has some diagnoses of bipolar and some other comorbid mental health issues. But so now my mom's the primary caretaker of her, and we talk a lot about transitions, and I'll probably talk a little bit about that tonight. But the world of transitions for people who keep aging, because everybody does, including people with autism, is something that we just don't. She lives in Texas, in Austin, Texas, and they just don't know where she can go, because personal care homes focus on folks with disabilities in Texas, but then she has dementia as well. And if she can't go into a memory care place because they won't take anyone with autism, and so it's just a whole new world of not having services that are appropriate, and so yeah, I have a lifelong love of work with disability policy, which is why I am here to talk to you tonight about disability policy. So, Bart Baldwin.
We could have you come and talk a lot about your aunt and that end of life, which is what we all fear for when we're gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. Sorry.
Yes. No. And I would really prefer to have this be a dialogue. And so if you all have any questions at any point, interrupt me, please. And if you have questions, I work in policy world, which is it's not necessarily always really in key with what's happening on the ground. And so if you have questions that I can't answer, I'll write them down and I'll take whatever I can up for you. So Bart Baldwin is who was supposed to come speak. He is, I joined his firm in October. He is at the Capitol because they are currently in the budget conference committee. The House and Senate are trying to work out their differences in their budget. They're hoping to get that done soon, but that means you're just at the Capitol around the clock. You don't get to leave. And so Bart and I have clients. We work with Autism Speaks. We work with a group of ABA providers throughout the state, and we also work with Hopebridge.
You do, yes. We are so thankful for you all. So our interaction that we have, not to take away, but when Sarah is talking about the House bills that are up there, it's so important for all of us that are involved in the autism world to make our voice heard. So where we look to get help from Sarah and from Bart when they're rallying for, with our lawmakers to make our voice heard and be that representation. So they have been a constant to us. So it's so interesting that you guys are here tonight. So I'm so glad I came. Yeah.
I wish Bart had been here because he was instrumental in getting the original Autism Insurance Mandate passed in live here in Kentucky yet. I was doing policy in Texas, but I'll get into all that in just a second. Just a quick note about me. I have been doing behavioral health, mental health, substance use, and disability policy this whole time. I joined Bart in October. Before that, I worked for the Legislative Research Commission as an analyst on the Health and Welfare Committee, and my job there was to focus on disability and behavioral health policy. So I did all the autism bills and everything related to that, and regs and administrative regulations and everything like that. Prior to that, I was in Texas and Austin and worked both for a legislator inside the Capitol doing the same stuff, and then on the outside for a foundation that did, a research foundation that provided research, expertise and advocacy to the Texas legislature on behavioral health and disability policy. So this is an issue area that I'm very passionate about. But when it comes to the Kentucky mandate and kind of the history there, Bart would probably have been better to speak to you about that. But I know it pretty well. So if there's anything I can't answer, I'll be sure to get back to you and get your information. So I'm going to talk about the two pieces, the Medicaid side and then the commercial private insurance side. I guess to talk about Medicaid would probably be a little quicker because we're working on expanding access in that area in a really specific way. So most licensed providers can bill for Medicaid. LBAs, licensed behavior analysts, can bill for Medicaid. But in order to bill for RBT, like that registered behavior technician who spends most of the time with an individual with autism, they can't bill. The major problem with Medicaid right now is this very specific issue that that level of a practitioner cannot bill for Medicaid unless they are working for a BHSO, a Behavioral Health Services Organization. To be a BHSO, you have to have a certain level of licensure within the state, which comes with, inspections and all the things, the hoops you jump through to get that licensure. You also have to be accredited, which comes with a certain amount of cost. So to be a BHSO, you also can provide a wide array of mental health, substance use services. So it's kind of prohibitive for people who like a Hopebridge, even though they are getting their BHSO in these places, but like for a clinic-based type of setting to get their BHSO license, just to provide services. And so what we're trying to do is have Medicaid. We have been working with Medicaid very closely for, I think, a year and a half to insert into our state plan amendment, which is what we submit to DC, to the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, our amendment to our Medicaid, basically, plan in the state. And we have had confirmation from them that in that state plan amendment that they submitted is a piece to allow MSGs, multi-specialty groups, to bill for that RBT level of service. Multi-specialty groups is really just a couple providers, or a group of providers. And so you get a separate kind of Medicaid provider number. You don't have to get this big licensure, this big accreditation, this other kind of big hoop to jump through. And so that would allow that would increase access to services considerably, we think. The state plan amendment has not been approved yet. We're still awaiting CMS approval. So we've been told that that's coming any day now, but we also had to wait in Kentucky a good 16 months or something to get the 1115 waiver approved.
And you might have explained this, but is Bluegrass.org, are they a BHSO?
They are a CMHC, a Community Mental Health Center. I believe they have their BHSO. They have tons of services and licensures and tons of providers and things like that. So they would be able to bill for all of those services likely. But it's more of so ABA providers throughout the state, we don't have a whole lot because we just got that licensure not too long ago, and so that workforce is building, and a lot of kind of clinic-based smaller settings aren't going to have their VHSO. So a bigger outfit like Bluegrass would, a CMHC would likely.
But a single, like a Hopebridge or a ABA that's got one person as an executive director, verbal behavior, BBC, do they meet the criteria for what is considered a VHSO?
It would depend on whether they applied for that licensure.
Okay.
And so there are some settings that are very aware of this issue with Medicaid and have decided to go ahead and become VHSOs exactly because of this issue. It is cost prohibitive if you're a smaller organization, and so it's a lot harder for a group that doesn't have the funds to get accredited and to go through all of the pieces that come with licensure from the state. And so there are, that would be a question I could ask the ABA providers, but there are a number of, there are a few, like Hopebridge, that have they went ahead and pursued their VHSO license because of this issue, but I believe the majority do not have that, which is why, and they can bill for the LBA in their setting, they can bill for speech OT, PT,
LBA?
licensed behavior analyst, but they cannot bill for that frontline worker who's spending most of the time. So in terms,
When you talk about Medicaid plan, are you talking about an 1115? What kind of plan are you talking about? 1915C? I mean, just
yeah, so this is just for Medicaid, straight Medicaid.
straight Medicaid.
Right. So this is not for the waiver population, 1915C waiver population, and it's not for this 1115 waiver that just got approval. That's doing changing kind of the expansion population in the state. So this is just for straight Medicaid. Yes. So that's kind of the Medicaid
So
situation.
hopefully that would make, greater access, especially in the rural areas where you have less of the big organizations. So in a sense, let's hope that would encourage that kind of availability of those.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's the concern is that, and granted, this issue that we've been working on is kind of specific to ABA, even though there are tons of other services out there or different types of providers that serve children with autism. But we've just been working on this because it seems to be the biggest kind of glaring hole within Medicaid. Yes.
Is there a secondary oversight then in place for that level? Whereas, you would expect to get accreditation and have to meet certain criteria. Is there going to be different licensure then created for that specific subgroup?
Like if an MSG is allowed, if a multi-specialty group is allowed to bill for these services, they'll still have to do all of the other things they would typically have to. They still have to be licensed in whatever field they're licensed in. They still have to be overseen by that board, their professional board.
Okay.
Still have to, whatever organization they're part of, if that's licensed in a certain way, still comply with all of those issues. And with Medicaid, you still have to comply with all the Medicaid regs and laws. And in order to become a Medicaid provider, you still have to be credentialed and enrolled into the whole process. And so you're overseen by that whole, so there's I think that's one of the concerns is that VHSOs came out when we opened up the network to allow behavioral health services to be provided by organizations that weren't kind of like our safety net quasi-state organizations in 2014, and it was a good thing to increase access to services, but to require that licensure for services like this, or just there's a lot of oversight and a lot of other ways that they're getting stuff. So the deputy commissioner at Medicaid that we've worked very closely with to ensure this was in the state plan amendment left in the end of December. She retired. But the new deputy commissioner we've worked closely with as well, and I knew her when she worked at House Leadership, and we're very hopeful that it is. They keep telling us it is in the state plan amendment, and we just have to wait for approval. So, and then once they approve it, then they have to do all the promulgation of regs that are changed. The government does not work particularly fast, but we're hoping that this will be a solution that will actually help folks. So.
And one of the things that comes up is that ABA as a service is a therapy that might be helpful for a wide continuum of developmental disability categories, not just autism. So is that kind of something that's being kind of threaded into the whole, as they move forward with all of this?
Yes.
That's being incorporated?
Yes, that is, and that's a really good point, because the code that we're hoping MSGs are able to bill for, that RBTs would be considered under this code, is CCSS. It's the Comprehensive Community Support Services Code. That's not specific to ABA, that's not specific to RBTs. That is a code that any behavioral health any behavioral health providers can bill for comprehensive community support services. And so it's allowing MSGs to bill for that. Doesn't just affect ABA providers, it affects all behavioral health providers who may be able to bill for that service now, who are MSGs. And not so many acronyms, and not VHSs.
Now, what's an MSG?
Multi-specialty group.
Oh, okay.
I think it doesn't save time to use all the acronyms when you have to use the word, yeah, so that will affect all behavioral health, it won't just affect it. So that's a key thing as well. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you brought up, Melanie, because, and I can tell you from our perspective as Hopebridge, we actually started out in Indiana. So like I had mentioned, I'm a nurse by trade, and like as you're a physician, when you look at, or we look at as clinical providers, we would think that the licensure would be reciprocal, meaning, it would cross borders and allow me to practice as a nurse or him as a physician, or in, an RBT, whatever. So as we're throwing out all those acronyms. So in the state of Indiana, though, you have to have a diagnosis of autism and be on the spectrum in order to qualify for ABA services. In Kentucky, you do not. So it is, it's been such a difference for us. So, I have parents like, I have talked to several of you in the room, and we as Hopebridge would have loved to be able to be expanded into Kentucky long before now. But it's the rules and regulations, and, it's that red tape. But I will tell you, as frustrating as it can be from where you all are sitting from your perspective as a parent or as a guardian and involvement, on the flip side of that, if you can kind of grit your teeth and bear it like through the frustration piece, this is really protection for your kiddos. It is a painstaking process to get it through legislation, but on the flip side, again, it is a protection just to make sure that fly-by-night, providers or companies are not coming in to a specific area or to be able, to try and provide behavioral health support to your child.
And there's other kind of therapies. Are we just, because there's therapies like relationship development, or DIR. We'll throw out these initials. The Denver Play Model. The Play Project. Different kinds of therapies that requires a certain level of competence, and you have to sign in your name in blood and jump through fire hoops and all that kinds of. But will some of these other interventions also be kind of incorporated? Right now, it sounds like we're just talking about the focus on the ABA.
Yes.
But is there a plan to kind of expand and incorporate some of these additional? Some of these things are evidence-based, and they would be wonderful additional options to include. Because you're trying to match the specific intervention with the needs of the individual, kind of thing. But right now, it seems like there's a focus on it being the ABA kind of therapies, right?
Well, if you're a Medicaid provider and you're a psychologist or you're a physician or you're LCSO, if you're a Medicaid provider and you're providing services to children, then you can provide services using any of those, paradigms. that there's nothing, I guess, prohibiting that unless you are having specific issues becoming a Medicaid provider because of who you work for, those kind of things. And so that's, I think, why this push was, because this seemed to be a hole that was not, for this specific provider, that seemed to be kind of like one that really needed to be fixed. But like I said, any number of types of providers, if they're Medicaid providers and they're serving individuals with autism, there's nothing preventing them from.
Well, and we definitely have an issue with opioid and addiction and kids being more prenatally exposed. And I just think, to me, it's just trying to figure out, different kinds of interventions that might be a good match for some of these different populations. Because right now there really isn't anything, other than just pray, but to be able to have something that's very direct, that maybe would help some of these, especially the little guys, the itty bitties, that would be so neat.
Mm-hmm. Is there any other legislative action that you're currently?
Yeah, so I'm keep thinking about every little thing that's moving right now. I do want to talk to y'all about the commercial side, because there's a big bill that we just got. It's not signed by the governor, it's not law, but it has passed, and it's changing our commercial insurance law in Kentucky when it comes to autism. But there are also a few other bills that I do want to talk to you about. One has to do with MCOs, because I said, if you're a Medicaid provider, it shouldn't be hard. It can be difficult to be credentialed and enrolled and become a Medicaid provider in Kentucky. We have a lot of red tape. So there's a bill about that. There's a bill about telehealth. There's a number of things that are happening at the Capitol, and we only have 4 days left of session, so a lot can happen, even though that doesn't sound like much time. So the big thing that has happened is HB 218 has passed. It has passed the House, it passed the Senate, Thursday night, and it is on its way to the governor's desk to be signed and not vetoed. So that bill, so in 2010, Kentucky got its Autism Insurance Mandate. We were the 17th state, I believe, to pass a law like that. Now there are 46. And in order to get that bill passed, in order to require insurance companies to cover autism, there were concessions made, which typically happens when you're trying to get something passed and you're working with a number of parties. And one of the concessions that was made was there are dollar caps and age limits in our insurance law. So for large group, up to age 7, you get like $50,000 a year of coverage, tops. 7 to 21, it's $1,000 a month. So something magically happens when you turn 7 and you only need, a fifth of the coverage? And then in the small group and individual market, it was $1,000 a month regardless of age. So it's not uncommon in order just to get anything through, you make concessions, but we do know that there are families that hit these caps. And more simply, it violates 2 federal laws to have these caps and limits in our state law. Mental health parity, in 1996 law was originally passed. Then in 2008, they kind of filled some loopholes. That largely dealt with group. So mental health parity requires anything you're covering for physical health, mental health has to be covered at the same. You can't have discriminatory practices between those two. And then the Affordable Care Act, when that was passed in 2010, that really reinforced and buttressed the Mental Health Parity Act, but it also, through its essential health benefits kind of benchmark plan requirements, brought in the small group and individual market into parity, and also has a non-discrimination provision. So discriminating against any number of things, like a diagnosis, is against federal law. So we had been working with Department of Insurance to try and get them to, a lot of other states either have fixed, well, I don't say a lot, 13 other states have gone back and changed their law. Some departments of insurance in other states have issued memorandums or kind of guidances to their carriers to say you must comply with parity, you can't have these caps and limits specifically about autism. Some insurance companies in other states are complying with this, but when it comes to Kentucky are not. So the Department of Insurance did not want to legislate from the executive branch. They believed the law needed to be changed in order for them to do anything. And so we filed a bill this session and basically got rid of all those caps and limits.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is autism considered to be a mental health issue?
Well, that is the crux of the issue. That's, I think, one of the issues that we've been having in order to get it, in order to move this, because insurance companies can deny based on the fact that they say it's not. The argument that because it is included in the DSM, the Diagnosis and Statistical Manual by the American Psychological Association, because it's included in that, that right there means it should be considered under the umbrella of a mental health condition. And our definition in statute was just loose enough to where, I don't think they were interpreting it correctly, but just loose enough to where some were saying that it was not a mental health condition, so parity did not apply. And I know there is a big argument about whether autism should be considered a mental health condition, but for the purposes of removing a discriminatory law, and because most statutes in different states are just referring to the DSM, if someone has a diagnosis according to the DSM, then just because of that, it should fall under the umbrella of mental health condition. Not when it comes to, we even had we had to answer this question this session, and we had a developmental psychologist kind of write this thing up that was talking about the developmental piece of that has to do with age, when, at the time of the diagnosis can happen. The fact that it's included in the DSM should protect our statute. We changed the definition in this bill as well to say just if you have a diagnosis according to the DSM. And that should make it crystal clear. I don't think it was unclear before, but make it crystal clear that mental health parity should apply in this case. But that is not I don't want to go into that argument on the ground because,
I'm with you.
I think people who are, much smarter than me and have much, and have studied this issue in terms of like clinicians should make that call. But in terms of statute and what other states have done and what insurance companies what the basis of their denials, that was the way to and other states have done the same thing. So that was the approach there. So, and the thing about some of the pushback we got, there's a current lawsuit happening, and it received class action status about a year ago of families hitting these caps. And a lot of times, especially the Senate has said that they do not like to pass laws when there is pending litigation on the issue. So that was something we had to overcome. We also had to overcome the fact that the Department of Insurance chose as their essential health benefits benchmark plan, which is Affordable Care Act requires that you pick this, doesn't have any caps or limits in it, and so that should take care of every plan except for large group, which I still think is a big hole. But they said, well, it should take care of all of these things, so the issue is kind of solved for most of the state. Well, the benchmark plan is not chosen in perpetuity, and it is not in statute. It doesn't change the fact that our statutes are still needed correction. And it doesn't touch large group, which was up to 220,000 families. We got the numbers there. So it was pretty clear to us that we needed to just change the law. That's what we needed to do. So it has passed, and it is headed to the governor's desk. There's no indication that he will veto it. He has surprised some folks with some vetoes before, so I don't want to act like everything's safe. There was a mental health bill last year that there's no indication that he would veto it, and he vetoed it. But the legislature overrode that veto. But so I just don't want to I would not say I'm a pessimist. I'm a realist. And so until that is signed and in law, then I'll breathe a little easier. But the one thing that is kind of a safety we have there is that the secretary of the governor's cabinet, who is now the acting secretary of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, is Scott Brinkman, and he was a sponsor of the original mandate, and he's a parent, so we think that there will be some support up there in terms of getting that signed. So that's the private insurance change that's happening that we think is change. There are also a few other bills that may affect this world of insurance, but it's more on the provider side when it comes to. There's a HB 69 is a bill that is changing kind of Medicaid MCO stuff. It's right now we have 5 MCOs. They're going to rebid all that again, but they like if you're a provider, you have to go through 5 different credentialing processes, one with each MCO, and then you have to be enrolled, and then you have 5 different sets of medical necessity, and just 5. It can be very difficult on providers, and so that's changing a lot of that. That has not been signed yet either, but it has been passed. There's a telehealth bill. I'm not sure how much services for folks with autism happens via telehealth here, but there's potential for telehealth to really take off in tons of areas. So there's a bill that's passed the Senate. It's before the full House, having to do with telehealth, with Medicaid and commercial insurance. So if you want any more information on any of those, and if you have any questions about the budget, the governor had his version, the House has their version, the Senate has their version, so they're hashing it out right now. There's a lot of substance use stuff in the budget. I can go into that if y'all want, but if y'all aren't interested in that.
It's looking like it's going to be a special session.
We did that before.
I don't know. There was some in leadership had expressed a desire to send the budget to the governor before veto recess. Veto recess starts on Thursday. And then we come back for 2 days, April 12th and 13th. They can move the calendar around and they can add a day because they saved one. They have to adjourn April 15th midnight. So they wanted to, I think some wanted to send the budget to the governor before veto recess, which never happens because usually they're working to the very end, to the very last day to agree and have their final budget. By doing this, the governor can veto whole bills, but he can line item veto the budget. And so that would let the governor do any line item vetoes he wanted, but then they could come back for those last 2 days and override any vetoes that the governor has done. So I know that was something that some wanted to do, to try to get it done by Thursday. That's a pretty lofty goal. The budget is a massive bill, and there's a lot of differences between the House and the Senate. So I'm not sure that will happen. But if they get that done, if they get the budget done, they still have the pension issue. So I would not be surprised if there is a special session no matter what. So that's we don't get to rest April 15th regardless.
As a neighbor, I'm not sure what the word is, back and forth with the the budget now, like things that had been suggested to be, like the governor had said these 70 different programs, he omitted those or left those out, or whatever it is. So could that be something where they could get put back in, or, because both the Senate and the House budget they had put some of those different things back in. So can that all, can there be movement in that kind of stuff now too? You know, could things that had been taken out be put back in?
Absolutely. They're in what's called a free conference committee. So this is getting a little nerdy and wonky because it's the stuff I love, but no one else really likes it. So if the House and Senate disagree on their version of whatever bill it is, this is the budget bill, is HB 200. They can appoint a conference committee, which is where they just have to agree to whatever is in the Senate version or the House version. They can only talk about things on those 2 pages, or however many there are. If they say they can't agree in that setting, they can call a free conference committee, which is anything's on the table. And they usually go to a free conference committee with the budget. So I think the House added in, and I'd have to go back and look, I think the House added in like 27 of those 70 programs back, and then the Senate added like only 12 or something like that. I'm not really sure what it was. So, yeah, all of those are on the table.
Kentucky, one of the 12,
No,
probably not.
no, but we were watching the ARC of Kentucky had been, and I actually sent Bart please put this back in, because that had been, and I can't remember how much money we're talking about.
125,000, I think.
Okay, but that had been eliminated, and so there was like a last kind of request to call your legislator to see if we can get that put back in.
Yeah.
And then and that's what I love this kind of stuff. I don't quite understand it, but I guess I'm wonky too, but just to go through and read everything, to kind of see what is included, and especially on the different kinds of advocacy groups like the Epilepsy Foundation, that kind of stuff got left in, and the Kentucky Autism Training Center got taken out, put back in, you name it. It was just kind of all over the place, and so to me, it's just so interesting to understand why and how, it happens that way. There's not a lot of logic to it,
You said Kathy got something on that project. Probably on the House.
on the House side, yeah.
I can check on that for you. I don't know where that stands. And that's the thing, is that they're still talking. You can still call, and you can still make your voice heard. And I wouldn't do this work if I didn't believe that you can change a legislator's mind with a phone call, because you can. You absolutely can. I've seen it happen.
So ask everybody here to call.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Put the ARC of Kentucky back in the budget.
Same
I
for
can get
Kentucky
you a
Autism
list.
Training.
Yeah.
I was at a
I'll
special
get
needs
you a list
expo
of
over the weekend
the
that they did in Bowling Green. And there was a lot of representation from the Kentucky Autism Training Center there. And, same thing, they were literally, as they were making their services aware, into parents and into the communities, they were, very honestly and realistically, they were very stressed and watching their cell phones and emails, for up to date and last minute, just to kind of see, what that next step is gonna be for them, so.
Do you know how much of their budget is represented by the state?
I do not.
Donation?
No, I can find that answer out for you, I don't know.
It's $150,000
Okay.
tobacco settlement dollars.
150,000, but what's their whole budget, I wonder?
Oh,
Or
it's
is
a whole
that
bunch more, because they got stuff in the post-secondary education, council on post-secondary education, and they got grants too. So, but the money that got taken out, put back in.
It's 150,000.
Yeah, and it was tobacco, settlement.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't quite understand that.
If someone was running for office, what would there be something specific that you would encourage them to campaign on? Like, what is one thing that you think is not being championed enough that would be, or maybe a couple things, but just, what's something that is doable that can, if enough people are working towards Good Kids on the Highway?
There are legislators down there. There's 138 of them. So there are legislators down there that care about deeply about disability issues and behavioral health issues, substance use issues. That's the hot button issue right now, obviously with the opioid crisis. So they a lot more care about that now than previously. So I don't want to act like there aren't champions down there. There are champions down there, but we could use a lot more. So any of those issues, I mean, one thing in the budget, I don't know if any folks in here have anybody on like an SEL waiver, that got a 10% increase in the Senate side of the budget.
Meaning they would open up more bids, or open up more slots?
There wasn't talk about slots. ABI waiver got slots, got 118 slots. But this SEL increase, it was 10% for each service under SEL. And I think, I'm going to forget the numbers now because I don't have it with me, but it was like $10.5 million to draw down $24.5 federal dollars. So it was such an obvious win to folks who were advocating for that. So
They ought to be able to open up some more slots with that kind of a budget.
yeah, and so things like that. I mean, they're looking at the waiver redesign right now. I mean, just services in general. I could talk to you. I mean,
Do
anything.
you know anything about where they are with the 1915C redesigns?
Not much more than y'all probably know. You know, they hired Navigant and they did those provider forums and family and consumer forums.
But I haven't heard any, that was like back in November.
Yeah, they released I thought there were going to be draft recommendations in the spring. I wasn't alone in thinking that. I think they had, or maybe a number of us heard that. What they released.
Well, they acted like at the beginning they were going to get it done in 6 months, but
what they released was a summary. They just released a summary of those comments from the forum. So you can find those online. I actually have a copy of that.
What website?
The cabinet's website. I think you go to the Department for Medicaid Services website, and I think it's on their front page. Yeah. And so if you're involved at all with those waivers, then you probably would know what the comments are going to say. Anything
So
like
they
that.
didn't have any recommendations, they just
So they're-
said, here's what we heard.
So they're supposed to have recommendations, I think, this summer. And so I think the message from the administration has consistently been that once they got this 1115 waiver approved to deal with the expansion population and how they wanted to change all of that and all of Medicaid for non-disabled adults, then they were going to tackle all of the 1915C waivers. And so even though their hands will be full rolling out the 1115 waiver, I think this is their next big focus. They really want to look at streamlining and changing how they do these 1915C waivers. So recommendations this summer.
April.
What's that?
They said they were gonna submit, they would put it out
Have
in
something
April,
out in April.
but I always don't hold my breath.
You have to add at least 6 months to
Yeah, I mean,
this.
but that's what the plan is supposedly right now.
Yeah, and so we're supposed to see recommendations this summer.
Now,
Navigant.
but this is just through the administration, right? This has nothing to do with the legislators at this point.
Correct.
But
Correct.
maybe they will make recommendations to make
So
new
depending on what their
legislation?
recommendations are, granted, these waivers, it's, there's not a lot, you know, Medicaid does so much with just approval from CMS in terms of how it operates. And so the legislature, we could definitely, there can be remedies in statute, but
But it's more of a federal thing.
so,
Well,
yeah, but depending on what the recommendations are, I think there will be plenty of room for advocacy, running for office too, on, you know, how they want to change these waivers. And most definitely, whenever those are released, if y'all have concerns, I think you burn up your legislator's phone line or email inbox with your.
The state people are saying those are just recommendations for us to take and we'll decide what
Right.
we're gonna do with it. Like, they're not saying they're actually gonna follow those
Right.
recommendations.
Yeah.
We're just gonna consider it.
who's
Consider
saying
that.
that?
Department for Medicaid.
Okay,
About the Navigant recommendation.
right.
So Navigant's kind of working along, I mean, as far as the recommendations, they'll come from Navigant, or will they be like state people?
They have a team in Medicaid. But these recommendations are coming from the contractors.
And if you follow what Navigant has done in other states, you know, kind of, I haven't looked at that stuff, just because I think it's so interesting. The big takeaway is that they have changed, as opposed to being able to access traditional Medicaid, then what's happened is they, tell me if I'm saying this wrong, you know, they switch people over to like an MCO kind of service, you know, so the carve out gets taken away, and then they get, those are the kind of services that the individual who's on the waiver is able to access. And that's our concern.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are watching for that.
So what does that mean if you're in an MCO, you don't get to choose your providers as
Well,
much, or what?
and this, probably better, the way I've seen it is basically it's the like the Humana Care Source or all these different insurances, it's like they put together, it's Medicaid, but they put together what's included into it, right? So whereas in traditional Medicaid, it's more robust, I don't know if that's the right way to say it or not, whereas the MCO, you get 12 of these and 20 of these, so it's kind of like that.
Like rationing services?
Well, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but they create their own plan.
To manage care.
Manage care.
Manage
And the whole
care.
thing is the same
MCO.
way.
Is it like an HMO then? Is that what an MCO is?
Managed care is just, they're.
I mean, regular Medicaid's already in MCOs, correct?
Well, say you have like Humana or Blue Cross Blue Shield or, and so basically it's their company that's doing Medicaid. So they put together their plan using Medicaid.
For managing the care of
They're
those
managing
clients.
the care.
So it sounds real not personalized.
Yeah, right. And so what I've seen, just in my humble experience with being, with working at UK, sometimes families have difficulty, like they'll say, they only gave us X number of speech therapy visits, or, you know what I'm saying? Or they limit the range of what their loved one can get. Whereas if you have traditional Medicaid, I don't know if it's just, robust is the right word, but it just seems like there's not the limits put on it that what you see with the MCO. Because there's an option that I have to always be careful and not say this in front of people, but if you have a certain MCO and you have a loved one that has unique needs, oftentimes you can have the opportunity to change MCOs for cause. And so there's some agencies that are, will serve different kinds of children and adults, that have different kinds of needs.
Like some of them will do a lot for diabetes.
Yeah.
And then others won't have good services for diabetes. So when you try to pick one, I put families that pick one for one family member because that one is good on that particular disability. But then they have another person, and you have to be in the same, the family has to be in the same one. So it seems to be more complicated to me to be in an MCO, and you're more likely to not get as much of services that you need if you manage care.
You will definitely benefit by doing your research on this. So, and I agree with Melanie, and I'll give you just an example that would pertain to this group. Like, we had a child that was coming to us for services, for our doctor to diagnose, to see if this child was on the spectrum. So this particular insurance company would pay or would, authorize that visit for them to see our doctor in order to diagnose. However, after that child, when he was deemed on the spectrum, that child had no ABA benefits whatsoever. So, here's this child, we're looking at, we need early intervention, and based on the diagnostic testing is on the spectrum and recommended for ABA therapy, OT and speech as well, but then the insurance company kicked back and said, we're sorry, this child has no ABA benefits. So, as parents and guardians, just along what she said, it definitely behooves you to look at those very individually for what your needs are, but then also to be in contact with your legislator. I mean, those people in Frankfurt, they were probably like, oh my gosh, this is Kim Wiseman again, because I called the other day, had nothing to do with autism, but I'm a very big animal lover, so there's a couple bills, going on right now, and so I called, and she said, well, what's your name? I said, Kim Wiseman. So she asked me, she goes, are you at Ravana Drive? I said, yes, ma'am, that's me. So, but they will get to know you. But it is, that's the most important piece, is just to continue to advocate and get in touch.
That drives me nuts, because like the doctor, it'll be prescribed for the needs of the child.
Absolutely.
And it's like that voice, that advocate, that physician, it's like that's not listened to. You know what I'm saying? That's
And
what
you're
just
right.
drives me crazy.
Well, and I think if you take the look at it too from the perspective that these physicians are equally as frustrated, and I can tell you from a nursing perspective, if this doctor has a patient that has high blood pressure and he has tried 3 or 4 different medications for this particular patient, none of them have controlled that patient's blood pressure. And then the 4th one that we found finally controls it, and then they will say, I'm sorry, doctor, that medication is not on our formulary. Again, so it is, yes. So, that's what's going to work best for the patient, but that's not what's going to have the coverage. So you hit the nail on the head.
For everything.
Yeah.
Because my husband's company was considered self-pay.
Yes, I was gonna say, that could be
So
one that.
we had a great
Mhm.
advocacy. My husband was able to speak with an advocate at his job, and it got it changed for the whole company, this international company. So that's wonderful. And so now we're able to get speech and ABA and OT and anything else. But they had a specific exemption for autism.
Yeah, just continue to be that advocate.
Well, no self-insured, Department of Insurance in Kentucky doesn't have any governance of it. And so those self-insured plans, and I know that's incredible what your husband was able to.
His company is
I've never heard of
he has
that.
What company is that?
They have an advocacy program, so he was able to speak with an advocate with the highest human resources. And within a month, we got a letter in the mail saying, in January, ABA and speech will be covered, and OT,
Wow.
so everything.
Well, and I know that's one thing that Autism Speaks will do, is they'll try to have those conversations with self-insured groups, and they have a growing list of companies that they.
But they didn't have to follow that mandate.
No, they don't at
And that
all.
was really frustrating, because we were looking at thousands of dollars in bills to get him the therapies that he needed. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But now it's completely covered.
That's amazing.
So.
And that is the thing, I think, MCOs, it's Medicaid managed care, they're there to manage the care of that, and they wouldn't have been contracted if part of the managing of the care was to save costs, right? In general, Medicaid has this massive budget, and everyone's concerned about it. And so they have all of these tools that they can use, that insurance companies use, and like prior authorization, medical necessity determinations, things like that, and limiting certain visits and requiring lower levels of care when appropriate. And I know that's one thing that I think people have had a hard time with Medicaid managed care, which is why we have HB 69, which one of the pieces is that medical necessity issue. If a provider believes that one of their patients needs this service, but then they're kicked back and said, no, they don't need medical necessity, and they're like, well, how are you determining that? Well, a lot of that was they were told that was proprietary, because they're not the state, they can do what they operate kind of more in that private market system. And so that's one thing HB 69 was trying to confront, was creating some sort of single medical necessity formulary, for lack of a better word, for behavioral health, for physical health, and to have that known to the provider so they actually can see what is the basis of denial, because they are trying to be that advocate for a lot of times, and it's difficult to understand, especially when you're dealing with 5 companies, and so I think there was definitely an appetite this session. The legislators haven't heard quite a bit from folks and from providers that it's been a difficult road with Medicaid managed care. So
Are there any pieces of legislation that affect having medications paid for?
Paid for, there is a big bill that has to do with Medicaid, pharmacy benefits. And it's SB 5, and it carves out pharmacy benefits from Medicaid managed care and brings it back in-house to the Department for Medicaid. It's in a very, it is before, has it passed both sides? I'd have to relook, I can't even remember if it's passed the House yet. I believe it has, but I think the House and Senate have different versions, so they're gonna have to come back together. But it was pretty contentious because the MCOs and PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers that they subcontract with, did not want this bill to happen. And so, but it's moving, and it has to do with the frustration that folks have been feeling, mainly independent pharmacists, but I think consumers as well, with the way PBMs are operating within Medicaid. Because they're considered subcontractors, and so the Department for Medicaid has an ability, I hope I get this right, an ability to have access to a number of things that each MCO has because they're contracting with the MCO for the provision of Medicaid. But pharmacy benefit managers are subcontractors of the MCO, and so the state couldn't even tell you why they're charging independent pharmacies so much and bigger chains, not as, things like that. So there is a big bill that had to do that. But I don't know of bills that have to do with like cost on the pay. I mean, I think that would affect that for Medicaid.
Well, like, my son he has like 7 medicines he takes for seizure control, and one is $1,000 a month. So I'm just like, nervous if anything happens that he doesn't get that Medicaid coverage for his, I think it's $2,500 a month is what it might up to. So yeah, like, change it. It's going well now, he doesn't pay anything for it now. But he, that's more than, well, that would be his whole income, basically, just one medicine.
Yeah.
So I'm just nervous about that.
Sure, rightly so. I don't know that there's been much talk about how that, I mean, I know there's concern that right now the situation can kind of trickle down to the consumer because pharmacies would have no choice but to pass on some of the exorbitant costs that they're saying they're dealing with. So this is hopefully a solution for that, but I'm not sure.
So I should be supporting that bill, basically.
I don't want to say that. We haven't worked too much on this bill, and carving in and out of Medicaid managed care is tricky. But it seems like the Department for Medicaid has come on board and really worked instead of not wanting to just feel like they were, I think, kind of more opposed toward the beginning of the session, and they really worked with the bill sponsor to change the language to where it'd be acceptable to them. So it sounds like this bill is moving. But if you want more information on it, I can definitely give it to you. Do you have any other questions about a budget or session? And I can get, you had asked about a list of names. There's the budget conference committee members on the House and Senate. I can get you the list of names. So if you want to make calls specifically to their office, you can always call your own legislator, obviously, but I can get that list.
If you called the 1-800 number, the message line,
Yes.
Could you say, I want to send a message to all the legislators that are on the budget conference committee, and they would know who they were?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. You can even just call them and say it's my own legislator. You can say to any committee, so you can say the budget conference committee, for sure.
Budget conference, yeah.
The members on, both the House and Senate, and you can always, and they prefer the message line, but you can always call their offices directly too, and leave messages.
Well, you can just hit a lot more people at once.
That's true, very true.
But if they're on committees, will they pay attention to you even though you're not from their district?
At this point, I think they're expecting that they're going to hear from everybody.
Right.
But yeah, they do tend to pay more attention to folks in their district, be more responsive, I would rather say.
But do they know, that you said, I want it sent to this committee? Or do they just?
No, I don't think so.
contact
I don't know how those green slips are added, but they do pay attention to, they're written on little green slips, and they do.
Did they return to the physical green slips? Because for a year or so, they weren't doing the paper green slips.
They have the green slips. I think you can, there are some legislators who do not like that process. But there are some that stack their green slips on their desk, and when you go in and meet with them, you see it.
And they know which is which.
So I know that there are times when legislators are inundated with calls, or they believe so strongly about an issue that they can get a bunch of calls and they still wouldn't change their mind. But you wouldn't see the fact that there was such a will to have a pension bill and this massive presence on phones and in physical person of teachers at the Capitol. That bill is pulled. Like, so they're making your voice heard. It changes things, good, bad, or otherwise. It does. They listen.
Do you have a list of the most recent legislators? Ones that were elected like last year?
The new ones?
Whoever the newest ones are?
I can find a list.
Because we saw Kelly Flood, and Kelly Flood was saying the people you need to be getting in touch with are the newest ones who, that they don't know that much about it and they haven't been educated.
Yeah.
And if you contact them, because we were, because she's like, I'm already on your side, you're wasting your time coming here.
That's what
Here's who you really, here's who you need to be talking to. I don't know who they are, so.
Yeah. Well, and they're all up for election this fall. So, a lot can change. A lot can change this fall. So, but that's the thing is that, these are folks who,
That's what I need.
these are people who have their own professions, their own area of expertise, and so you can't expect someone who's a banker to get down there and be able to vote on SCL rate increases and know what they're doing, unless someone is informing them and helping
And
them.
just explain just how it affects my
Yes.
child, just a real quick little educational thing.
Yeah.
Would you vote for this, it won't hurt you,
Yeah, they need, they would love to have, I think, they all, need to and actually would like to have, folks who are affected by the policies, they may come sit and talk to them. But I get a little like Leslie note from Parks and Rec, and I think everyone needs to just go get involved in government. Things will change. But I do believe, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe that.
so you could get us that list of those folks?
I bet I could find a list of.
Just send a few of them
Yeah.
to Sarah, and she could put it out to us, then we would make calls to them. I think that would be helpful.
Freshmen, yeah. And remember that they are all running again. On the House side. Yeah, half of the Senate is up for election, so.
Are the senators' terms 6 years in the state?
They're 4 in
They're
the
just 4 in the
state, yeah.
state?
At federal level, yeah, there's 6.
I know the federal they're 6, but
Yeah.
are they just 4 at the state?
Yeah, and so it's half and half. So
okay.
every 2 years it's the full House, and then half and half for the Senate. They rotate. Odd number districts and even number districts. So, yeah. So, you all have any other? I can get I'm sure you all have the legislative message line, but I can get that number again. I can list the conference committee members and then new legislators. Is there anything else that y'all would like to see, or? I'll leave my card, but if y'all have any questions, just please email or talk to us anytime. I have a personal connection to autism, and I am dedicated professionally to working on these issues. So I would love to. If there's any bill or any budget thing or anything I can help you with, I would love to help you with it.
So let me ask you another question. My son goes to Carol Brown. Are you familiar with Carol Brown and Episcopal?
No, I'm not.
She is a parent of an individual with disabilities, and he had issues with verbalizations, and she's went around and studied everywhere, and she kind of put together a way of training the mind. And it's for folks who have autism, but other disabilities also, and she's even done presentations at Toyota, just to the regular people. But I know she's always looking for how to fund some of her work. So if she's doing something like that, she has a whole system together, would she be somebody that could do the, whatever you're talking about, all the different acronyms, but she might be able to get paid for Medicaid? Could she maybe become a Medicaid provider?
I think it would depend on what is her professional licensure and if she's a Medicaid provider, and or if she wanted to be. And if she were, then, yeah.
She'd have to be a Medicaid provider to do that.
To bill for
It's
Medicaid.
really educational.
Mhm.
I mean, it's more than but she does, like with my son, she was using cold laser to help him with reflexes, reflexology, so it's medical partly, but it's also educational,
Mhm.
kind of combination of that.
Yeah.
So if she wanted to know whether she should, who would she contact to see?
I mean, I don't have an answer, but I could try to find one for her. Like, I could try to contact folks and see. I mean, if you wanted to give me her information, I can see if you can contact her if she wants to be a Medicaid provider or anything like that. If she would be appropriate for that CCSS code, yeah. Or any of the other codes. There's a gazillion of them.
She's worked with a lot of kids with autism.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's the fun world of a session, so.
Thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Thank you.